just another interesting icon that can help you here is transform data. If you want to get to the Power Query editor, which we're going to take a look at when we import our data sources, if you want to get there quick, you can go to transform data and then click on transform data again. So that's an option. A few others that will start to appear and they won't be grayed out once we import data. So one is creating a measure, which is kind of an aggregation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then ultimately, we're going to want to publish our dashboard, Power BI Online, and use the publish button for that. Let's check out the insert ribbon. So on the insert ribbon, you have inserting a new visual. So that's one way to do that. And then you can choose what kind of visual it is over here. But I more often than that, I would just go to the visualizations pane. And if I want to create a bar chart, I click on this one. Lots of different bar charts. You've got stacked column charts. You've got your regular you've got your clustered bar charts. You've got a line chart, combo charts, all kinds of charts you can create. And so then you can drag it to where you want it to be on the canvas. It's really user-friendly. It's point and click. There is going to be a little bit of coding that you can do. You don't have to do, but if you want to do some more advanced data manipulation, you might want to use the DAX language or the mQuery language. We'll show some examples of both of those within Power BI. All right, so I'm going to delete that for now, but that's one way to create a visual, but I usually create them over here. A few different options here. One that I'll call out is this paginated report. And what's going to happen is you can create a table and you'll be able to export that table to CSV, to Excel. Really easy to do that, but the downside is that the formatting gets lost. So for instance, if you have some long column headers and you want it to be expanded to the width of that column header in the Excel output that you download from Power BI, it won't be expanded right away. So if you want the font size and the column width and any kind of formatting to come through, whether you export it as a Excel file or you can also export it as a PDF file, paginated reports allow you to do that really, really well. Now, the downside is that there is a separate interface for creating a paginated report. In my opinion, not quite as user-friendly as Power BI. It gets a little complicated. But if you have a lot of use cases for needing really formatted exports, it's not enough to just export the data and, oh, great, I've got the rows and columns I need. I can your stakeholders can take it from there. If they're like, no, this needs to be customer ready when we export it, we don't want to have to do a lot of that extra expanding columns and formatting, then I would highly recommend taking a look at paginated reports. And what happens is you use the paginated report application to build that report. And then from here, you can connect to a paginated report that you've already created. And you can embed that in your Power BI dashboard. So you can have your paginated report, a nice table looking view, alongside of your charts and all the cool visualizations that you can do in Power BI. And there's some work to link them together. And you've got it in one dashboard, but now you've got a more formatted export option essentially. So you probably won't need that, but if you really have some specific exporting format needs, that could be a good option. You can also embed a Power App. This is a really neat use case, more of an advanced use case. We won't do this today, but if you create a Power App that's maybe a form that can take in information, you can use this option to embed in your dashboard that has tables and charts that visualize the data right next to it. You can have an option for your users to input data as well. Imagine you've created a dashboard for a sales team where they can see a list of customers that you'd recommend that they contact first. You've done the analysis, you've visualized it, you've got a rank list of customers, maybe even have some recommendations on what they should talk about when they call that customer. So they're doing that. Now, from there, a lot of sales teams want their salespeople to enter notes and to enter information about the fact that, hey, I just called this dashboard. A lot of folks use Salesforce for that. So they might have the Salesforce application open in another window and kind of writing and saving their calls there, which is fine. But what if you could just do that in one platform? Or what if you wanted to take user input within your Power BI dashboard for any reason? You could create a Power App and embed that directly in your dashboard. So now maybe you have your table of customers that they should call over here. And as soon as they call them, they're having the conversation right over here. They can input the data. And what usually happens with a Power App is it'll take that input and it'll save it to a CSV, and then you can work on that information. And maybe that's used to mark, hey, you've already called this customer. Here's the last time you called them based on what they inputted in that same Power BI dashboard. So in the same dashboard that you're visualizing data and showing the data, you can also use to input data by using this Power App integration. So look into that if that's a use case that you might have. The buttons are kind of neat here. We'll actually use this where we'll have an information button. I'll go ahead and create that while we're here. You can do a help button as well, all kinds of buttons that are available. And see, it just creates an icon with an eye on it. Well, you can resize it here. I'm just going to put that in the top right. Now, there might be a way around this, but you kind of have to do some Power BI gymnastics in order to get this to work in the way I'd like it to work, where we hover over it and it'll actually give us kind of a description of what our dashboard is all about. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But lots of options for buttons. Sometimes you want to put some shapes in there as well. I often use the line. So we'll use a few lines today. I'll go ahead and create a line here. I'm going to, for our color scheme today, change the color of this line. So what happens is when I click on this line, notice there's a format option that comes up here. And each visual, whether it's a table or a chart or a slicer, it'll probably have slightly different format options. And there will be two tabs under format, shape and general. So for shape in this case, I'm going to color it. In fact, for a line, it's really the border that's driving that color. So I'm going to change this to a black line. And I can resize it pretty easily. So I'm going to use this to maybe separate our title section eventually. So I'll just add that here for now. We'll put everything together a little differently in the end. But I'm also going to want some vertical lines too. What you'll notice is there wasn't an option for a vertical line. What we'll do is, and this works for any visual, copy and paste is your friend. I'm going to click on this line, do Control C, which is used in a lot of applications for copying, and then Control V, which is used to paste in all kinds of applications, including Power BI. And there we go. Now we've got two lines, and I didn't have to recreate it and recolor the line. All the formatting is the same. Now here's what I want to do. I want to get a vertical line, and so I'm going to click on the shape in order to get to this format option, and then I'll click on click on rotation, and under all, I'll do 90 degrees. A 90-degree rotation leads to a vertical line. Now I've got my vertical line here. So what we're going to do eventually is put our filters so that our users can interact with this data over here. And you don't have to have a line between them, but I'm just trying to make it aesthetically pleasing, and that's different for each person. So you may or may not decide to keep your lines here. I just wanted to show that. Now, another thing that we can do as well is import a specific image. In fact, this is exactly how we'll create our icon. So I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to select from our football icons that we saved. So I want to bring in, I'm going to bring in the football. There we go. I'm going to resize it here. I'm going to put this on the left of our title that we'll eventually put in here. There we go. So I've got an icon. And I'm also going to go ahead and bring in 3 other icons. We'll use these to essentially link to other sections. So I'm going to bring in the chart. And that looks good. We'll resize it here. Very easy to resize it. Put that in the kind of the top left here. I don't want to make it too big. Good. Going to bring in our scatter plot. We'll do a scatter plot visual And this will allow us to, we'll use this to actually link to that scatter plot visual. Now you can bring in icons for all kinds of reasons. You may just want to have a visual element to a measure, for instance, and so you decide to put an icon next to it. And we're gonna bring in one more, and that is our table. Trying to get everything lined up here. There we go. Okay, so I might need to bring my line down a little bit. All right. May iterate a little bit there, but we've got a pretty decent start. I'm going to use this as a way of going between tabs. So right now we've got one tab, and let's go ahead and just call this college football games. So we can rename a tab by right-clicking on it, and I'll say college football games. And then I'm going to ultimately create some other ones, but I'm going to wait until I want some of the formatting things that I'm doing now to be carried over to those tabs. So I'm not going to create a new tab quite yet. I'm going to ultimately right click and duplicate the page once we've got a few more things filled out here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to take this. This will be our slicer pane eventually, where we're going to bring in a lot of slicers once we've brought in the data. But I'm going to take this vertical line and do Control C after selecting it, Control V to get a second line. I'm going to put this right here to kind of mark off this section. Again, you don't have to, but I just find that aesthetically pleasing. So this will be our section to go between tabs, and I'll show how to do that soon. Here's our icon. Just this isn't going to do anything, but it just is kind of, well, it's a football dashboard, so we'll have a football icon there. I'm going to put a title here though, and it's really important to put a title in your dashboard, something that tells them exactly what they're looking at, right? So I'll add a text box here for that purpose. Blank text box by default. I'm clicking on the border. Usually clicking on the border works well to move visuals in Power BI. I'm going to create could do center aligned or left aligned. I'll do a left aligned title here. Choose maybe, let's see, 28 point on is probably good. I'm going to call this College Football Game Dashboard. There we go. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see if we got the centering right. Yeah, I think that's all right for now. Maybe I'll make this a little bigger. Cool. All right, so we've got an information icon that doesn't do anything yet, but it will eventually. We've got a title, some icons that'll help us get between pages, eventually a slicer pane over here, and then we're gonna put a bunch of tables and charts in this section right here. And the reason I included so much space here is we'll eventually put some cards, some measures right here. But that's a good exploration of this section of the Insert tab. All of these text boxes and shapes and images. Done a lot of that already. Let's go to the Modeling tab. Here you can actually create a new table. You can create a table that's a calculation of other tables. So we'll actually do that in today's session in order to manipulate our college football data set in the form it needs to be in to do what we want it to do. Parameters, we're going to use a few parameters today. This is a really neat concept where you can switch out the fields that things are broken down by. So we'll come back to that. I'm just highlighting a few things here. On the View ribbon, you can import and you can create your own color format, essentially your own theme, and so there's a few that you can bring in or use here. There's a whole theme gallery that you can look at, and there's some pretty neat themes online. I recommend checking that out. And you can even import your own theme as well as a JSON file. So many different ways to create a theme. And then again on the View tab, you've got Page View, which is what we're looking at here. This is a good default. Now eventually we may want to change the size of our dashboard, and I'll show you how to do that here. Click into just the white space here, the canvas, and you click on Format Your Report Page. And then when you do that, so it's important to click in the canvas first, not on a visual. If you click on a visual, this format menu is going to be based on that particular visual. But if you click in the white space, the canvas, what'll happen is now you've got the format your report page option, and one of the options under there is canvas settings. And so it's the 16:9 ratio by default. What you can do is go to the drop down there and click on custom, and from there you can customize the height and the width. So the standard 16:9 format has a height of 720 pixels, 1280 width of pixels. And what we might want to do is maybe we have a lot of filters and we need a little bit more room. We can change this to say 900. Okay, but what's going to happen is our dashboard is going to become smaller and smaller when we ultimately publish it online. Really extreme example, I guess, let's say we did 2000. That is going to be hard to read when we publish it if we leave it that way. Well, what we'll be able to do is change the page view here to fit to width. What that's going to do is fit to width and add a scroll bar for scrolling down. So, it could be a bad user experience, just having to scroll down, especially if all the slicers are up here, and whenever you want to apply a new filter or see what slicers have been applied, you have to slide up and slide down. So keep that in mind. But if your dashboard's going to be that tall and needs to be that tall, probably good to do fit to width so they can actually see the dashboard. Another option that we'll use today is to create another tab that people can go to. Now, by default, if you go to another tab, some of those filters you applied on the previous tab essentially go away. What we'll do here is actually sync the slicers so that if you do go to another tab that we'll eventually create, you won't lose the slicer selections. That's probably, if you can pull it off, probably an ideal scenario. We'll do that today. I'm going to go back to the format your report page, and I'm going to change the height. I'll go to 800, and I'll leave that scroll bar on for now, adjust that later. You can do a custom mobile layout if you prefer. I think Power BI does a decent job with using the layout that you use for desktop by default, but you do have the option of laying out a custom mobile layout. A few other formatting options. You can add grid lines if you want to get things exactly formatted. There is some good formatting similar to PowerPoint where it'll show you when an object is approaching another object. For instance, notice where the football is here, this icon, it kind of has a border here. If I start moving this around, it's kind of going to stop me right when it gets to the edge of that icon. So that works out really well. So even without grid lines, you can actually get a pretty good idea for where to put things through just that automatic snapping. If you want some really specific snapping to grid, you can turn on the grid lines in conjunction with snap to grid. And then notice how there's a little corner right here in the background. This is just one example. There's all these small little grid lines here, and it'll be really easy to just snap it there. You don't have to get it exact. So that's an option as well. I tend to not use these because I just find it easy enough to drag and kind of let Power BI stop that visual when it gets to the edge of another one. But some people find that helpful. Bookmark selection. We're going to implement bookmarks, so to speak, or at least page navigation through our visuals, the information visual, the icon visuals. And we'll do that a little bit later. So we can optimize features here, help all kinds of training options here. Formatting is going to be really important when we decide that we want certain visuals to interact with other visuals in a certain way. This edit interactions option is going to be really important. And you have the same thing that you'd have in PowerPoint, this idea of bringing objects forward or bringing objects backward. Now on the format tab, you have to have something selected for this to show up. But when you do select something, it can be key to determine how that visual interacts with another visual. And we'll see several examples for that once we import our data. We've also got a kind of a drill through option here. So lots of different tabs at the top. Hopefully that's a helpful walkthrough, and it'll really be helpful when we actually start to use those. But it gives you an idea of what's possible with those ribbon tabs at the top. If you like this video, I hope you'll consider liking it for me. And if you'd like to see more analytics, data science, and leadership training videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Finally, if you have any questions on what we discussed today, please leave a comment and I'll try to respond to it as soon as possible. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.